what is your outlook for inflation going forward? And perhaps has the situation in Ukraine increased inflationary pressures?
Well, I think the situation in Ukraine, I think, has really amplified the issues which we had before, right? So on the one hand, you've now got increasing near-term inflationary pressures, so commodity prices going up, across the board. Russia and Ukraine are large producers of all sorts of things, from wheat to gas and oil. So that's definitely happening. But on the other side, if we were worried that at some point in 22 or 23, we might see the start of a slowdown, perhaps maybe economies move through into a more mature phase in the cycle, people start to talk about recession, I think the risk of that has also just significantly elevated as well in terms of demand. So you've got to play these two things against each other, which I think is going to make investing quite interesting. If you'd have asked me where I think the best opportunities sit for our portfolio at about 4 a.m. on Thursday morning, I would have said it's in the companies that are in our portfolio. Probably still say that, but I probably wouldn't be sitting there jumping up and down with excitement, whereas at that point, I felt that there were some really quite attractive opportunities and some really good companies which had been derated by 5, 10, 15 PE points over the last 6 to 8 weeks. I think in the last sort of 3 to 4 days with everything that's happened in Ukraine, I'm probably a little bit more circumspect. But I think it's going to be quite a challenging situation to be able to navigate. And as we saw perhaps back in 2008, I think particularly, it takes a while for the impact of some of these events to feed their way through into financial markets. So if you think about Lehman Brothers, when it went bust, it really wasn't for 3 or 4 weeks before financial markets really started to reflect the full stress that caused. Arguably, this is potentially quite it's a different situation. It's not just about banks, but it is about the interaction of the financial system. The complexities and challenges which we might face might be quite significant over coming weeks and months. And so, I think it probably pays for investors to be, looking for opportunities, but also being quite judicious as well at the moment.
I think you're completely right, and it's such an uncertain environment at the moment. But it's good that investors, can look for opportunities, but of course they should be very careful too. Nick, what's your outlook for inflation going forward? And again, bringing in the Ukraine situation.
Yes, I mean, I would agree with Ben. I mean, incredibly difficult to, work out where it's going exactly. And as the US economist J.K. Galbraith said, there's two kinds of forecasters, those who don't know and those who don't know they don't know. And I'd put us very much in the former camp. The only thing we can say is forecasts are going to be wrong, but we just don't know which direction by how much. So, but, from obviously the shocking events that have happened in Ukraine, I think the risk obviously in the short run is going to go higher, and that will have markets as we've seen.
Yeah, that is an absolutely great quote by J.K. Galbraith, something that we should all remember. All predictions are generally wrong. But yeah, very sad scenes from Ukraine, and obviously that would lead to inflationary pressures. Charlotte, what's your outlook for inflation going forward?
Yeah, similarly, we're keeping really open-minded, and it's really just our job to think about, what are the potential risks? What are the different scenarios that we're faced with? And where have the risks changed? And I do think we have, versus the financial crisis, where you saw quite a quick return to austerity. There was clearly monetary stimulus, but nothing like the fiscal stimulus that we've seen in response to COVID. There is a risk now of inflation that wasn't there in the real economy. That you had asset price inflation then. Now, actually, there have been transfers of, for example, COVID disbursements in the US into people's bank accounts. So people who might actually and who are actually spending it. And this is a transmission mechanism that is needed for inflation to actually occur. So I think watch this space, and wage inflation is going to be a really important driver of whether this current inflationary bout is sustained, how wages respond to that higher cost of living, because ultimately that will and should, if it does sustain, that will underpin demand going forward, and then it impacts all areas of inflation, not just the goods prices, not just the energy prices that we're seeing currently.